It was an average Thursday morning, just like any other. Or so I thought. I was sitting at my desk, sipping my coffee and checking emails, when the notification popped up. A bank alert. My heart sank as I stared at the message. Unusual activity detected on your account. I clicked it open, expecting to see a random charge or a minor inconvenience. But what I found made my blood run cold. There were hundreds of dollars worth of transactions I hadn't made. Flights, hotel bookings, and even purchases from online stores I'd never visited. The worst part, it was all under my name. I immediately tried to call the bank, but of course, I was put on hold for what felt like an eternity. My mind raced as I went through the transactions one by one. How was this happening? Who could have stolen my information? The answer came to me slowly. There was only one person who could have done it, Karen. Now, you might be wondering who Karen is and why I was so certain that she was involved in this. Let me take you back a few months to explain. Karen was my neighbor, and not just any neighbor, but the one who seemed to know everything about everyone. If there was a neighborhood event, Karen was there, always on the front lines. She always seemed to have a perfect life, perfect house, perfect lawn, perfect smile. But behind that facade, she was a master manipulator. She had a way of worming her way into people's lives, gaining their trust, and then using that trust to her advantage. She had always been nice to me, or so I thought. I mean, who wouldn't be friendly when they were after something, right? It started innocently enough with her offering help with things around the house, gardening tips, advice on repairs, even offering to borrow some of my personal information for community records. At the time, I never thought twice about it. She was just being a helpful neighbor. But looking back, I realized I had made a huge mistake. I had unknowingly handed over the very information she needed to destroy me. Karen had somehow found a way into my personal files, accessed my online accounts, and used my identity to make fraudulent purchases. She didn't just steal my money. She was trying to ruin my credit, destroy my reputation, and erase everything I had worked for. As soon as I saw those bank transactions, I knew that I had to act fast. This wasn't just a theft. It was an attack on everything I had. I couldn't just call the authorities and wait around for them to handle it. No, I was going to do something about it, and I was going to make Karen pay for what she had done. I gathered all the evidence I could, screenshots of the transactions, account statements, even the emails from the online retailers where my stolen information had been used. But that wasn't enough. I needed more than just proof of the theft. I needed a way to tie Karen directly to the crime, to show that she was the mastermind behind it all. That's when I remembered something that Karen had said in passing just a few weeks earlier. She'd mentioned how easy it was to forge documents, how simple it was to adjust records to fit one's needs. At the time, I thought it was just one of her weird, offhand comments. But now, I realized it wasn't a random statement. It was a confession. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. I'd always been meticulous with my documents, bank records, tax forms. Anything that required personal information was neatly organized. But what if Karen had been rifling through them, taking what she needed and using it against me? What if the documents I trusted had been altered or manipulated? I began combing through my files, both physical and digital, looking for anything that seemed off. That's when I found it. A set of fake documents that appeared to be official, but had one major flaw. They were in my name, but they were clearly forged. The handwriting was different, the format was inconsistent, and most importantly, the signatures didn't match. It was clear now that Karen had stolen my identity and used these fake documents to create accounts in my name. I felt a rush of adrenaline as I realized what I had. This was my chance to not only clear my name, but also turn the tables on Karen. She thought she could get away with it, that she could manipulate me and everyone else around her. But I was going to expose her for who she really was. I started making a plan. I needed to gather all the fake documents and make copies of them. Then, I would go to the authorities and let them see exactly what Karen had been doing. But I wasn't going to stop there. I was going to confront her directly. She needed to know that I wasn't going to sit back and let her destroy my life without a fight. The next few days were a blur. I spent hours collecting everything I could, from the forged documents to the bank statements and the screenshots of the transactions. I even contacted the companies where the fraudulent purchases had been made and asked them to look into the matter. They were shocked, of course, and promised to help me with the investigation. But as I prepared to confront Karen, I started to realize just how deep this situation went. She wasn't just stealing money. She was crafting a whole new identity for herself, using my name as a cover. If I didn't stop her, she would continue to wreak havoc on my life. I couldn't let that happen. I was going to take her down, no matter what it took. I decided to pay Karen a visit. Armed with the evidence I had gathered, I knocked on her door, my heart racing in my chest. She opened the door with that same, overly friendly smile she always wore. "Hi, what can I do for you?" she asked, her tone far too sweet. I didn't waste any time. "I know what you've been doing, Karen," I said, stepping into her house. "I know you've been using my identity to steal from me." Her smile faltered for just a moment, but she quickly recovered. "What are you talking about?" she asked, though there was a nervous edge in her voice. "I've got everything," I said, pulling out the fake documents and the bank statements. "I've got the proof, Karen. You can't hide anymore." Her face went pale as she saw the documents. "You don't know what you're doing," she spat, her voice now laced with panic. "You don't understand how big this is. You can't just throw everything away because of some mistakes. We can work this out. We can make it disappear." I shook my head. "No, Karen. It's over. You've ruined my life, and now you're going to pay for it." She glared at me, her face twisted with anger. "You're making a huge mistake. You don't know who you're dealing with. You don't know what I can do." I didn't flinch. "I already know exactly who you are, and you're done." Karen's expression twisted into something between frustration and fear, and I could see the panic flickering in her eyes. She wasn't used to being caught, and certainly not like this. For a moment, she just stood there, frozen, as if weighing her options. But then, the anger returned, sharper than before. "You think you can just walk in here and ruin everything?" she sneered, stepping back from me. "You have no idea who you're messing with. You're playing a dangerous game, and you'll regret this." I stood firm, my hand clutching the stack of documents. There was no turning back now. "It's too late for threats, Karen. You've already stolen from me, and you've hurt others in the process. And now, it's time for you to pay for what you've done." She let out a sharp, bitter laugh, the kind that sent a chill down my spine. "You think this is about money? You think this is about some stupid identity theft? No, this is bigger than you could ever understand. I've built my life on control, and I won't let you ruin that so easily. Do you really think the police will believe you? Do you think they'll take your word over mine?" I could see where this was going. She was trying to manipulate the situation, twist it into something that might make her the victim, as she always did. But I wasn't buying it anymore. "You've been lying to everyone around you for years, Karen. The truth is out, and you're going to face the consequences." I turned to leave, but she quickly stepped in front of me, blocking my way. "You can't just walk away from this. You have no idea what you've unleashed. You'll regret this. You'll regret me." I didn't stop. "I've already got everything I need to make sure you're exposed, Karen. You won't be able to hide anymore." I could feel the intensity of the situation weighing on me. I had to be careful. Karen was dangerous, and she had proven that time and again. She wasn't just going to accept defeat quietly. I left her house with the documents in hand, my mind racing. There was still work to do. I had to get the authorities involved, but I also knew that Karen wouldn't go down without a fight. She would try everything to erase the evidence, to destroy the proof I had. I spent the next few days preparing everything for the police. I gave them everything I had, copies of the forged documents, bank statements, and screenshots of the transactions. I even included the recordings of Karen's threats, showing just how far she was willing to go to protect her lies. The police were taking it seriously, but I could feel the weight of the situation pressing on me. This wasn't just a matter of stolen money anymore. It was about bringing down a criminal, someone who had built a life on lies and deceit. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more complicated, I received a call from the local news station. They had heard about the case and were interested in running a story. It was a big risk, but I knew it was the right move. If the public knew what Karen had been doing, it would be harder for her to hide. The more people who knew about her manipulation, the less power she had. I agreed to meet with the reporter, and we set up an interview. I was nervous, unsure of what to expect, but I knew this was the moment when everything could change. The story aired a few days later, and it spread like wildfire. The details of Karen's fraud were shocking, but even more so was the response from the community. Neighbors began to come forward, sharing their own experiences with Karen and how she had tried to manipulate them into selling their properties. It was just the beginning. As more people spoke out, Karen's web of lies began to unravel. The authorities moved quickly, launching a full investigation into her activities. I knew that this was the tipping point, the moment when she could no longer hide. But even as I watched her world crumble, I couldn't help but feel a little uneasy. Karen wasn't just a con artist, she was dangerous. I had exposed her for what she was, but I knew she wasn't going to go down quietly. The next few weeks were filled with twists and turns. Karen had a team of lawyers working around the clock to get her off the hook. She tried to discredit me, calling me a disgruntled neighbor who was making baseless accusations. But the evidence was overwhelming. The public support for me was growing, and Karen's connections in the community started to dwindle. Still, she wasn't giving up. Late one night, as I was going over some of the documents I had gathered, I received a strange email. It was from an anonymous sender, and the subject line simply read, "You're not safe." My heart skipped a beat as I opened the email. The message was short and to the point. "Karen has friends in high places. You've made a powerful enemy. Watch your back." I immediately forwarded the message to Sarah and Carter. Something told me Karen wasn't just going to fade into the background. She had more up her sleeve, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she was planning something drastic. I wasn't going to let her intimidate me. Not now. Not after everything I had been through. But the truth was, I didn't know just how far Karen was willing to go to protect herself. The fight wasn't over. Not yet. The email left me with a gnawing feeling in my gut. Karen has friends in high places. I kept replaying those words over and over in my mind. Who could she be talking about? Who was on her side, willing to help her hide her secrets and cover up her crimes? This wasn't just about her manipulation anymore. It was about power, influence, and a network of connections that I hadn't even begun to understand. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Karen wasn't just a neighbor. I had underestimated her. She had connections I hadn't known about, and now that I was involved, I realized just how dangerous it was to mess with someone like her. The next day, I tried to go about my normal routine, but the unease lingered. Every time someone knocked on my door or a car slowed down near my house, I found myself tensing up, wondering if it was someone coming after me. I kept the blinds closed, rarely left the house unless absolutely necessary, and made sure to update Sarah and Carter on any suspicious activity. But as much as I tried to stay calm, I couldn't ignore the growing sense of danger. Then, things took another strange turn. I received another call, but this time it wasn't from Sarah or Carter. It was from an unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me I should answer. "Hello," I said, my voice tight with suspicion. A familiar voice crackled through the line. It was Karen. "You really think you've won, don't you?" she said, her voice cold and threatening. "You think exposing me will make you the hero? You have no idea how much trouble you've caused. I hope you're ready for what's coming next." The words sent a shiver down my spine. I wasn't sure what she meant, but the way she spoke made it clear that she wasn't backing down. This wasn't just a fight for justice anymore. It was a battle of survival. "I'm not afraid of you, Karen," I said, my voice trembling only slightly. "You've been caught. The authorities know what you've been doing. You can't hide forever." Her laughter on the other end of the line sent a chill down my spine. "You really think you've won? You don't know anything. This game is just beginning, and you're about to see just how far I'm willing to go to protect myself." Before I could respond, she hung up. I sat there for a moment, staring at my phone. The implications of what Karen had just said were clear. She wasn't going to just roll over and accept defeat. She was planning something, and I had no idea what it was. But one thing was certain. She wasn't going down without a fight. I took a deep breath and tried to focus. I couldn't let fear control me. I had made it this far, and I wasn't going to let her intimidate me into backing down now. I had to keep pushing forward. The next few days were a whirlwind. The pressure from Karen's side grew, and so did the threats. I received multiple anonymous messages warning me to stay quiet, to stop digging into her business. They weren't subtle either. Some included veiled threats against my family. Others hinted at personal harm. The intensity was rising, but I knew I couldn't give up now. Every part of me screamed that I had to finish what I had started. I spent hours organizing all the information I had, ready to make my case even stronger. But just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I received another unexpected visit. This time, it wasn't from Karen. It was from a man I'd never seen before, a tall figure dressed in black, his expression unreadable. He wasn't wearing a suit, but he carried himself with the same air of authority that Karen did. He didn't introduce himself immediately. He just stood there, in my doorway, watching me. Finally, he spoke. "I think you know who I am," he said. "I've been sent by Karen." I could feel my heart racing as I stared at him, unsure of what he wanted or how much trouble I was really in. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He smirked. "It's simple. Karen wants you to stop. She wants you to let her go. She's given you the chance to walk away. But if you don't, well, I think you know what will happen." My mind raced, trying to process what was going on. This wasn't just some empty threat. This was a direct message from Karen, and it was clear that she was ready to escalate things. "I'm not afraid of you," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. "And I'm not stopping. You can tell Karen that." The man's face twisted into a cold smile. "You don't have to be afraid of me," he said, "but you should be afraid of what happens when Karen has to make you disappear." He turned and walked away without another word, leaving me standing in the doorway, my heart pounding. I didn't know what "make you disappear" meant, but I didn't want to find out. I slammed the door behind me, locked it, and sat down on the floor, trying to steady my breathing. I wasn't sure what Karen was capable of, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't let her intimidate me any longer. I had already come too far. I called Sarah and Carter immediately, explaining what had just happened. They both advised me to go to the police, to file a report about the threats. But I didn't want to involve them just yet. The last thing I needed was for Karen to find out I had made a move before I was ready. I knew I had to act quickly. She had already shown that she wasn't above using intimidation or even violence to protect herself. The next step was clear. I had to use her own tactics against her. If Karen thought she could control me, then it was time for me to turn the tables. I knew what I had to do, but I also knew it wouldn't be easy. Karen thought she had me cornered. She thought her threats and intimidation would make me back down, but she had underestimated me. I wasn't the type to back away from a fight, especially when I was this close to bringing her down. But this time, I had to be careful. I couldn't just walk in guns blazing. I had to play her game, only better. The first step was to gather more of Karen's tracks. I had already uncovered her forged documents, the stolen identity, and the manipulated bank statements. But now, I needed to get something that would tie her directly to the threats against me. I needed something irrefutable, something that would make it impossible for her to wiggle out of. That night, I spent hours in front of my computer, going over the documents again. I'd been through them 100 times, but something wasn't clicking. Then it hit me. The meeting she had with that developer weeks ago. The one I had caught on camera. What if I could prove that she was using her forged identity to secure these deals? What if I could trace the payment history directly back to her? The next morning, I contacted the local bank, the one where I had found the fraudulent transactions. I explained the situation, told them about the forged documents, and requested that they assist me in tracking any payments that had been made using my stolen identity. The representative was hesitant at first, but after I provided the evidence, they agreed to help. While I waited for the bank to dig deeper, I decided to take another approach. I reached out to a few of the residents who had been threatened by Karen. They had been hesitant before, but now they were starting to speak out. As I spoke to them, I could feel the momentum building. More people were beginning to realize they weren't alone. Karen wasn't just after me. She had been manipulating and threatening everyone who stood in her way. One of them, Mrs. Patterson, a retired teacher who had lived in the neighborhood for over 30 years, told me something that sent chills down my spine. "Karen's been pressuring people to sell for years," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I overheard her talking to some developers once. She told them she could get people to sell their homes for a fraction of the price if they just kept the pressure on. She used the HOA rules to push people out, and she kept telling everyone that the neighborhood was changing." I took mental notes as she spoke. This was more than just a few shady deals. This was a pattern, a calculated effort to force people out for her own profit, and I was determined to stop it. I spent the next few days following up on everything. The bank had traced a large sum of money back to one of Karen's accounts, an account that wasn't even under her name. It was in the name of a shell company, but the address linked to the account was registered to her. It was clear now. Karen had been laundering money, hiding it under fake identities, and using her HOA position as cover. With this new evidence, I felt more confident. I knew I had a solid case, but I also knew that if I exposed it all too soon, Karen would retaliate. She was dangerous, and I couldn't afford to make a misstep. The next step was to get the right people involved at the right time. I called Carter, told him everything I had learned, and asked for his help. "This is bigger than we thought, Carter. She's not just trying to steal from me. She's manipulating entire blocks of this neighborhood, pressuring people into selling, and funneling money through fake companies. She's been at this for years." He was silent for a moment before replying. "I'll make a few calls. We'll get the ball rolling, but we have to be smart about this. If we go public too soon, she could destroy the evidence. We need to build a case that's airtight." That night, I stayed up late, going through the paperwork one last time, making sure every detail was correct. I didn't sleep much, but I knew I couldn't afford to rest. Not now. The next morning, Carter called me. "We've got a plan," he said. "I've arranged for the bank to release the full details on Karen's financial transactions. We've got everything lined up. The authorities are ready to move. We'll need to confront her in person and give her one last chance to step down. If she doesn't, we go public." I nodded. This was it. It was time to put everything on the line. We set up a meeting with Karen, telling her we had information about the fraudulent transactions and that we were prepared to expose her unless she agreed to step down from her position in the HOA and cooperate with the authorities. I had no illusions about her agreeing to do the right thing, but I had to give her that opportunity. Maybe, just maybe, she'd see the writing on the wall and walk away before things got worse. When we arrived at her house, Karen greeted us at the door, her smile still that cold, calculated grin that I had grown so used to. But this time, I wasn't intimidated. This time, I had the upper hand. "You think you can intimidate me?" she sneered as we sat down at the table. "You're making a mistake, both of you." I didn't say anything right away. Instead, I slid the stack of documents across the table, watching as her face turned pale when she saw them. "This is the end of the road, Karen," I said, keeping my voice calm but firm. "We have everything. The forged documents, the bank transactions, the shell companies. It's all here." She looked at the documents, then back at me, her face twisting into a mask of rage. "You don't know what you're dealing with," she hissed. "You think I'll go down because of this? You're wrong. You have no idea who you're messing with." I leaned forward. "I already know exactly who you are. And you're done. The authorities are coming, and there's nowhere left for you to hide." Karen's eyes flashed with anger, but there was also something else, a flicker of fear. For the first time, I saw her truly vulnerable. She had been caught, and she knew it. Her empire was crumbling, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Karen's eyes narrowed as she took a slow, deliberate breath. Her lips twitched, and for a moment, I thought she might try to play her usual game, lying, manipulating, or making empty threats. But instead, she seemed to deflate just a little. She knew I had her. "You think this is the end, don't you?" she said, her voice tight, almost pleading now. "You really have no idea what you're getting into. This isn't just about a few deals or some forged documents. You don't know who you're dealing with." I could feel my heart racing. She wasn't just scared. She was desperate. Karen had lived her life in control, manipulating those around her, bullying her neighbors, building her little empire through deceit. But now it was all coming down, and I was the one who had brought it all to light. "You're right," I said, my voice steady. "I don't know everything, but I know enough to bring you down. And I'm not stopping. You've hurt too many people, Karen. You've used your position to destroy lives, and now it's time for you to pay for it." Karen's face flickered with a flash of something dark, rage maybe? I couldn't tell, but the intensity in her eyes made it clear she wasn't about to back down quietly. She stood up suddenly, pacing the room, trying to regain some control. "You have no idea what kind of people I'm involved with," she said, stopping in front of me. "You think the police will take you seriously? You think they'll be able to stop me? You don't understand the game I'm playing. I'm not just some neighborhood HOA president. I've got connections, people who'll make sure this whole thing goes away. You don't stand a chance." I didn't flinch. "Maybe you've got connections, but that doesn't change the fact that I have the evidence. You can threaten me all you want, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm not backing down." For a moment, there was silence. Karen just stared at me, her eyes narrowing as if she was trying to decide what to do next. It was clear she was weighing her options, but she was running out of time. She knew she had no choice but to play her last card. "You think you've won," she said softly, "but you haven't. I'll make sure you regret this. You'll be sorry you ever decided to go after me." I held her gaze, my resolve unwavering. "You've already lost, Karen. You can't threaten me into backing off anymore. It's over." With a final, venomous look, she turned and stormed out of the room, leaving me alone with the weight of what I had just done. I knew the battle wasn't over, but I felt a sense of victory. For the first time, Karen wasn't in control anymore. She had underestimated me, and now she was going to pay for it. The days that followed were a blur. The news of Karen's shady deals and her manipulation of the HOA had spread quickly. Neighbors who had once been too scared to speak out were now rallying together, supporting each other, and sharing their own stories of how Karen had tried to push them into selling their homes for below-market value. The media picked up the story, and soon, reporters were calling me for interviews, asking about my involvement in exposing Karen's corruption. I didn't want the attention, but I knew that if I didn't speak out, Karen would find a way to spin the narrative in her favor. I worked closely with Sarah, the lawyer, and the police to make sure everything was in order. We filed official complaints, handed over the evidence, and made sure the authorities were taking Karen's actions seriously. But even as everything seemed to be falling into place, I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen was still lurking in the background, waiting for her next move. A week after our confrontation, I received another anonymous message. It was short, cryptic, and chilling. "You've made a mistake. The people I know won't let you win." The message sent a chill through me, but I refused to let it deter me. Karen's threats didn't scare me anymore. I had come too far, and I was too close to winning to let fear take over now. But the truth was, Karen wasn't just some petty criminal. She had connections, and I couldn't underestimate the power she still had. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the people she had manipulated, the lives she had destroyed, and I thought about the anonymous message. Who was she working with? What did she have up her sleeve? I wasn't naive enough to think Karen would just fade into the background. She had a way of twisting situations, and I knew she wouldn't go down without a fight. The next morning, I received a call from the police. They had found something important. Karen's connections went deeper than they had initially thought. She wasn't just manipulating property deals. She had ties to several high-profile figures in the real estate and banking industries, people who had helped her cover her tracks. "I think we're starting to uncover a bigger network here," Detective Carter told me. "We're going to need more time to dig into this, but you've helped us find the first real piece of the puzzle." I felt a mix of relief and dread. On one hand, this was what I had been hoping for, proof that Karen wasn't just acting alone. But on the other hand, I knew that this was only the beginning. If the authorities were right, Karen had been part of something much bigger, and exposing her could make things even more dangerous. As the investigation into Karen's network continued, I started to notice subtle changes in my daily routine. Strange cars parked near my house, unfamiliar faces on the street. It wasn't much, but I couldn't ignore it. Karen wasn't finished yet. She was still watching, still plotting. The days felt longer as Karen's influence seemed to extend further than I had originally realized. I was being watched, and the subtle signs were unmistakable. The neighborhood, once peaceful, now felt suffocating. The quiet hum of activity outside my window became increasingly unsettling. Strange cars passed by at odd hours. Every time I stepped outside, I felt eyes on me. It wasn't just paranoia anymore. I could sense it. Karen was making her move, and I was at the center of it. One afternoon, I came home to find a package waiting for me on my doorstep. There was no return address, just my name written in bold letters on the front. My pulse quickened as I carefully opened it. Inside, there was a small, unmarked envelope with a single piece of paper. The message was short, typed in all capital letters. "You're playing a dangerous game. You won't win. Your next move will be your last." I couldn't help but feel a rush of dread. Karen had already threatened me several times, but this felt different, more personal. I immediately texted Sarah, but when I tried calling the police, my phone died. I could feel the pressure building around me, tightening like a vice, but I knew I couldn't let her scare me. I went inside and gathered all my files again, double-checking everything. The police were still working on gathering evidence against Karen's network, but I knew they needed more to take her down once and for all. I had done everything I could to expose her for who she really was, but now I realized I needed to push harder. I called Carter, leaving a message on his voicemail. "I think it's time to go public with everything. I can't keep living in fear. The evidence is there, and Karen is about to do something drastic. I need your help, and we need to get ahead of her." Later that night, I received a reply from Carter, his voice urgent. "Meet me tomorrow at the office. We've got something big on Karen, and we need to figure out how to use it." The next morning, I drove to the office with a heavy sense of purpose. My gut told me that this was it. We had all the pieces, and it was time to confront Karen once and for all. When I met Carter, he had a serious look on his face. He handed me a stack of documents. "We've traced Karen's transactions to an offshore account. She's been laundering money through fake shell companies for years, and we've got enough to tie her directly to several large criminal organizations. This is bigger than we thought." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Karen wasn't just manipulating the HOA or stealing money from residents. She was involved in a much larger network, one that could bring down far more people than just her. I felt a new sense of urgency. "We have to move fast," I said, my voice tense. "We need to act before she disappears again, or worse, destroys the evidence. We can't let her get away with this." Carter nodded. "We'll get everything ready. But you have to be careful. She's already threatened you. We can't let her know we're coming." "Not yet." We spent the next few hours preparing everything, finalizing the documents, making sure the police had all the information they needed. The pressure was building, but every time I thought about how far Karen had gone, how much damage she'd done, I knew that we couldn't stop now. That night, as I was heading back home, I noticed something unusual. A car parked across the street from my house, its headlights off. My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't paranoid, but the sight of that car immediately set me on edge. I kept my eyes on it as I pulled into my driveway, but the car didn't move. I glanced around, checking to see if anyone was watching from the shadows. It was too quiet, too still. I hurried inside, locking the door behind me, and pulled the blinds, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Karen had already made it clear that she wasn't going to back down, and now I was more certain than ever that she was preparing for her final move. The next day, I received a text from Sarah asking to meet. The tone of her message was urgent. I agreed to meet her at a local park later that afternoon. As I arrived, I noticed she was waiting by a bench, looking worried. "Have you been followed?" she asked, her voice low. I felt a rush of unease. "I think so. Last night, there was a car parked outside my house, and it didn't leave. I don't know who it was, but I'm getting the feeling that Karen is closing in." Sarah frowned. "We need to be cautious. If Karen's as connected as we think, she'll stop at nothing to silence anyone who gets in her way. We're not just dealing with a fraud case anymore. We're dealing with something far worse." "I know," I replied, my hands clenched into fists. "That's why we have to act fast. We need to take everything to the authorities. Get them involved before she can move against us. But even as I said those words, I could feel my resolve weakening. Karen was dangerous, and I knew that even if we exposed her, she wouldn't go down quietly. We spent the next few hours strategizing, finalizing our plan to take Karen down once and for all. But as we left the park, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't the only one who had been watching. I glanced around, but the park was empty. I had no proof, but I knew. Karen was closing in, and I had to make my next move count. As Sarah and I left the park, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was almost as if the air had changed around us, thick with an invisible tension. My mind raced, constantly flicking through every possible scenario. What would Karen do next? How far was she willing to go to cover up her tracks? And most importantly, what could she possibly do to stop us now that we had everything we needed? We didn't speak much as we walked back to our cars. Sarah's face was clouded with concern, her usually composed demeanor now laced with worry. "Be careful," she said before we parted ways. "I know this isn't easy, but we need to keep our focus. The authorities are ready. We just need to wait for the right moment." I nodded, but deep down, I felt a sense of dread. Waiting felt like a trap. The closer we got to exposing Karen, the more desperate I knew she would become. I had already seen her threatening behavior, but now, with everything on the line, she would stop at nothing to keep her empire intact. That night, after locking the door and checking every window in my house, I sat down at my desk and went through the documents once again. There was a sense of finality in what we were doing. We were going to take her down, but the idea of it felt heavy. The power she held over the neighborhood, over people's lives, wasn't something she would just hand over easily. The next few days blurred together. The police were moving forward with the investigation, but Karen was still in the shadows, plotting her next move. And though I kept hearing whispers of her involvement with powerful figures in the city, there was no direct proof yet. I had seen enough to know that Karen had ties, and those ties weren't just with local real estate agents or banks. They were with people in positions of real influence. And then it happened. I was sitting at my desk, flipping through some notes, when I saw the shadow move across the window. I froze. The car. It was there again, parked across the street. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just a random car. It was the same one I had seen the other night, the same one that had been watching me. I grabbed my phone, dialing Carter's number quickly. The phone rang 3 times before he picked up. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice full of concern. "You've been quiet for the last couple of days." "I think Karen's here. The car's parked outside again. I'm not sure what she's up to, but I'm getting the feeling this is her move." "I'm on my way," he said immediately. "Stay inside and don't do anything stupid. We'll be there in 15 minutes. I sat by the window, watching the car closely. It was dark now, and the headlights were off, but I could still see the faint outline of the vehicle. No one was getting out of the car. No one was moving, but I knew Karen didn't need to be physically here to cause trouble. Her reach was long, and her mind was always working, always calculating. The next few minutes felt like hours. Every passing second added to the growing tension, my mind constantly jumping between the worst-case scenarios. Was she planning something? Was she waiting for me to make a move? Or worse, was she already setting something in motion that I wouldn't be able to stop? The sound of a car door opening outside snapped me out of my thoughts. I stood up and leaned closer to the window, straining to see through the dark. But it wasn't Karen. It was a man in a dark coat, his face partially obscured by a hood. He moved quickly, glancing around before heading toward the house across the street. He didn't look like someone coming to visit a neighbor. He looked like someone who was looking for something, or someone. I felt a chill go down my spine. Was he connected to Karen? And what did he want? I picked up my phone again, quickly texting Carter. "There's someone outside. Not Karen, but a man. He's going into the house across the street. I see him." Carter replied instantly. "Stay put. We'll be there soon." I didn't want to wait, but I knew I had to. I couldn't confront this man alone, especially if he was part of Karen's circle. I needed to stay calm, gather more information, and wait for Carter to arrive. The minutes dragged on, and the man finally came back out of the house, carrying a small black bag. He didn't look around this time. He was focused, moving quickly back to the car. It was then that I saw it. He was carrying something that looked like a set of documents. I held my breath. Could this be what Karen had been hiding? Were these the final pieces of the puzzle I needed to destroy her? The man got in the car and drove off without a second glance, disappearing into the night. I stood frozen for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. The urgency of the situation hit me all at once. I didn't know if he had taken the documents to Karen or if they were the last of the evidence I needed to finally expose her. I needed those papers, and I needed them now. I grabbed my coat and headed out the door, my mind racing. But as I reached the driveway, I saw the police car pull up, Carter and another officer stepping out. They had arrived just in time. "Stay inside," Carter ordered, his voice tense. "We need to make sure we have everything locked down before we take the next step." I didn't argue. I watched from the window as Carter spoke to the officer, gesturing toward the car. They were preparing to make their move. I had to trust them now, more than ever. But deep down, I knew something was off. Karen wasn't just going to roll over, not without a fight. And she still had one last trick up her sleeve. I watched from the window as Carter and the officer moved toward the car, their steps measured, purposeful. The tension in the air was palpable, and my heart raced as I waited for something, anything, to happen. I felt like I was watching the final act of a play. But the problem was, I didn't know how it would end. Carter looked back at me from the sidewalk, his expression grim. He wasn't giving anything away, but I could see the determination in his eyes. He wasn't just there to make sure Karen didn't get away. He was there to finish what we had started. This wasn't just about the stolen identity anymore. It was about taking down the whole operation she had built. I stayed inside, heart pounding, as Carter and the officer searched the car. They were checking every compartment, every bag. I could see them talking, and then I saw Carter pull something out of the back seat. A small, black bag, just like the one the man had carried earlier. They opened it up, and I saw Carter's expression shift from focused to something darker. This was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. They found something. Carter walked back toward the house, his eyes scanning the area, checking for any sign of danger. He knocked on the door, and when I opened it, he handed me the bag, without saying a word. I looked down at the bag, my mind racing. It was small, inconspicuous, but the weight of it was almost too much to bear. Inside, I found what I had feared, the final pieces of Karen's criminal empire. Dozens of forged documents, fake IDs, contracts, and more bank statements. This was it. This was the evidence that could take her down for good. "You did good," Carter said, his voice calm but with an edge of satisfaction. "This is the proof we need. We can finally put an end to this." I nodded, but I knew it wasn't over yet. Karen still had connections. She wasn't the kind of person who would just accept defeat. The game had shifted, but I could feel her trying to stay one step ahead. "Where is she?" I asked, my voice tense. "Is she here? Is she planning something?" Carter's expression darkened. "We haven't found her yet, but we're close. She's running out of places to hide. We've got a few more leads, and the authorities are getting ready to make their move." I wanted to believe him, to trust that this was the end of the road for Karen. But something gnawed at me. I knew her too well. Karen wasn't one to go down quietly, and I had the feeling she was just waiting for the right moment to strike. I spent the next few days in a blur of activity. With the evidence we had, the authorities were finally able to put a solid case together. They tracked Karen's connections, and more people began to come forward with information. It was like a domino effect. One after another, the walls started to close in on her. But then, just when I thought things were finally under control, I received a call that stopped me cold. It was an unknown number. My hand shook as I answered it. "Are you ready to lose everything?" Karen's voice came through, cold and venomous. "I told you this wouldn't be easy. You think you've won, but you haven't even begun to understand how deep this runs. You're nothing more than a pawn in a much bigger game." I clenched my teeth. "I'm done being intimidated, Karen. You're finished." Her laugh echoed through the phone, dark and mocking. "We'll see about that." I ended the call, my stomach sinking. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I had seen enough to know that Karen was preparing for a final showdown, and I had no idea what she had planned. The next few days felt like an endless waiting game. The authorities were closing in, and I could feel Karen's desperation mounting. She was scrambling, trying to make sure she didn't get caught. But it wasn't enough. She was running out of options. Finally, the breakthrough came. Carter called me one morning, his voice filled with urgency. "It's time. We've got her. We've tracked her down to a safe house in the outskirts of the city. The authorities are moving in now." I felt a rush of relief and excitement. The moment I had been waiting for was finally here. But I also knew that Karen wouldn't go down easily. She would fight, and I had to be ready for whatever came next. Within hours, the news was out. Karen had been arrested, her entire operation exposed. The authorities had found everything: the forged documents, the money laundering, the manipulation. It was over. Karen's reign of control had come to an end, and she was going to face the consequences of her actions. But as I sat there, watching the news unfold, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that this wasn't the end. Karen was too dangerous, too resourceful to be finished, just like that. I had won the battle, but I couldn't help but wonder if the war was still ongoing. If you enjoyed this wild ride and want to hear more about the twists and turns of this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Stay tuned,